Hello, and welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're embarking on something pretty major. Episode 20, covering the complete story of Steve Jobs.
Yeah, quite a figure.
Absolutely. We're exploring the life of a visionary who, well, radically redefined modern technology, and because of that, really shaped global culture as we know it.
It's a genuinely riveting biography. And for you listening, we've gathered, well, a pretty definitive stack of biographical excerpts covering his entire journey.
So what's the plan?
Our mission today is basically to use this incredible life story as a vehicle for advanced English learning. We want to focus on high-level vocabulary, those nuanced expressions, and the kind of robust storytelling techniques you need to really master narrative English.
I love that framework. So we're not just, reciting history. We're using this history to study mastery itself. Let's jump right in then with the core question.
Okay.
What drives a person to completely reinvent the way we listen to music, how we communicate, and even how we think about the whole aesthetic of our digital tools?
That tension, that's really the central focus of pretty much every source we looked at. Jobs wasn't just an entrepreneur, was he? He was this force of influence across fields that are, honestly, spectacularly diverse.
Personal computing?
Digital music with the iPod, animation through Pixar, and critically designed philosophy. And that philosophy, it sort of married this stark Bauhaus simplicity with the intuitive focus of Zen thought.
Which resulted in the modern aesthetic we almost take for granted now.
Exactly, that clean look.
And the sources, they immediately emphasize this duality, this kind of push and pull. On one hand, you've got this profound technical curiosity, a real passion for electronics. But then on the other hand, it's coupled with this incredibly powerful, sometimes, let's be honest, abrasive and fiercely demanding personality. His life feels like a series of contradictions that somehow fueled breakthroughs.
Precisely. So before we even lay out the timeline, we kind of have to confront that defining theme.
Genius or obsession?
Was his success primarily a product of sheer, unadulterated genius? Or was it an unhealthy degree of obsession? Or maybe that unique, often difficult synthesis of both? That question really informs every major decision.
And every crisis that followed.
And every subsequent crisis we're about to explore. #C1, Early Life and Foundations, 1955-1972.
Okay, let's unpack the foundations then. We start in 1955, his adoption by Paul and Clara Jobs, and it's pretty clear from the sources that the foundation of his world, it was built on this deep respect for craftsmanship.
Absolutely. Instilled by his adoptive father, Paul.
Yeah.
Paul Jobs was an immensely important figure, a quiet man, apparently. His passion was restoring and selling old cars. He actually set up a workbench for young Steve right there in the garage, teaching him fundamental, practical, hands-on skills.
But the lesson that really went beyond just mechanics, the one that informed his entire philosophy, that came later when Jobs recalled the fence Paul built.
Ah, the fence story, yes. The lesson of unseen quality. That anecdote is critical.
It really is.
Exactly. Paul insisted that craftsmanship, it had to extend to every single minute detail. He taught Steve that even the parts no one would ever see, like the back of a chest of drawers or the inside of a fence facing the neighbor's yard,
Right.
those parts had to be made perfectly too. For Paul, the integrity of the object was absolute. Didn't matter if anyone else would see it or not.
That sets such an impossible standard, doesn't it? It's more than just thinking outside the box about how something works. It demands this internal aesthetic perfection.
It's a standard that would later, financially cripple one of his companies, Nextd.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely the core of the Apple design ethos.
And that standard was fostered in this environment that was just, boom, turning into the epicenter of innovation.
Right. Los Altos was changing so fast from agricultural land plum and apricot orchards into what we now call Silicon Valley. Steve was literally surrounded by engineers, neighbors working on incredibly advanced, specialized military and government projects.
Things like radar, specialized batteries.
Early photovoltaic panels. This upbringing, right there in the garage, surrounded by tech, it just nurtured his intense curiosity.
And there was one neighbor in particular, Larry Lang, an HP engineer. He was really influential.
Yeah, an amateur radio enthusiast. He gave Steve gadgets, showed him basic principles.
Lang's demonstrations were apparently quite formative, especially with electricity. Jobs' father had initially argued that a carbon microphone and speaker would need an electronic amplifier.
But Lang showed the young boy how simple batteries could actually amplify sound in a very basic way. These real-world sort of trial and error examples of electronics. They were just way more engaging than school.
And speaking of school, yeah, the sources paint a picture of severe intellectual restlessness. We're not talking minor misbehavior here.
These were high-level disruptive pranks.
High-stakes mischief, exactly, like dogs chasing cats during a fake pet day.
Changing everyone's bike lock combination so nobody could leave campus.
And the infamous one, setting off a firecracker under his teacher's chair, Mrs. Thurman, apparently gave her a nervous tech. He was, let's just say, difficult.
Yeah, he was sent home repeatedly before third grade was even over. But here's the fascinating twist.
His father.
Paul Jobs defended him, constantly, argued that the school was the one failing to keep his son interested and engaged, not the other way around.
That early pattern, expecting the system to rise to his level instead of him conforming to it, that's a huge signpost for his future professional style, isn't it?
Absolutely. He was already showing that mix of sensitivity, high intellect, and, abrasiveness that would define his business dealings later. His intellectual haven then became the HP Explorers' weekly meetings.
Held in the HP cafeteria, he called it paradise.
Right. Focused on emerging tech like light-emitting diodes, LEDs. It was this formal but still relaxed environment where his curiosity could really flourish. Hashtag C2, youth, spirituality, and the dropout, 1972 and 1976.
Okay, moving into 1972, we see this rebellious streak just intensify. Jobs heads off to Reed College, which was a pretty expensive liberal arts school, and he immediately finds the mandatory classes just tedious. The sources mention him complaining about having to read the Iliad and study the Peloponnesian Wars.
His time at Reed was really characterized by this profound rejection of conformity, of structured learning. He dropped out pretty quickly.
But it wasn't because he disliked learning, right?
No, not at all. It was more a crisis of conscience. He felt this immense guilt spending his working-class parents' life savings on an education that he personally just didn't value. That decision led to a period of intense financial hardship, sure, but also incredible intellectual freedom.
And this is the era where all those famous frugality anecdotes come from, sleeping on friends' floors.
Returning soda bottles for the 5 deposits just to buy food.
And walking 7 miles across Portland every Sunday night for that one guaranteed good meal at the Hare Krishna Temple.
Yeah, but this poverty, it was kind of self-imposed and really instructive for him. He later connected this whole period to his life philosophy, the one he articulated so famously years later.
You can only connect the dots looking backwards.
Exactly. He trusted his inner intuition above everything else. He didn't know why he needed to do these things at the time, only that he had to.
And maybe the most important dot he connected during that time, especially for Apple's future, was that calligraphy class he audited at Reed.
Oh, absolutely priceless detail. If you care about Mac's design history, this is huge. He decided to audit the best calligraphy instruction in the country, right there at Reed. Learned all about serif and sans serif typefaces, spacing, the whole subtle art of typography.
He called it artistically subtle.
Right. And he had no commercial application for it then. But that knowledge became, well, arguably the single most crucial element in designing the Mac's visual interface. It made it revolutionary compared to every other computer out there.
This intense period was also just steeped in counterculture, wasn't it? Spirituality, psychedelics, rock music.
Bob Dylan, especially. Hugely influential. He really embraced Zen thinking, influenced by Shunryu Suzuki and his longtime spiritual advisor, Kobun Chino.
And Zen meditation, how did he see that?
As he described it, it taught him that only by calming the mind, stripping away all the noise and distraction, could genuine intuition really flourish. That allowed for clearer vision. It was his path to living more completely in the present moment, a practice he even tried to apply to product development later.
And this 7-month trip to India was part of that.
Part of that intense spiritual quest, yeah. He came back with a shaved head, wearing Indian cotton clothes. Apparently startled his parents quite a bit when he called them from the Oakland airport.
And it was around this time that the really pivotal relationship in his career started to solidify. His partnership with Steve Wozniak.
Was 4 years older than Jobs, just a gifted engineer who shared Jobs' love of pranks and Dylan. They had this essential complementary dynamic. Well, Jobs was quite mature for his age, possessed this innate understanding of product packaging, market appeal, while Wozniak was maybe slightly immature for his age, but possessed the pure, unadulterated engineering talent.
Their first commercial venture together was arguably illegal, right?
Yeah.
The blue box.
Yes. A device designed to basically circumvent the phone system and make free long-distance calls. They manufactured and sold about 100 prototypes.
For fun and profit.
Pretty much. With Jobs providing the strategic vision and the sales drive, he even used the fake name Oaf Tobark. This early venture just reinforced the power of combining Woz's technical skill with Jobs's, let's say, entrepreneurial daring.
Jobs then landed his first proper job at Atari.
Hmm.
But his abrasive personality and maybe questionable hygiene.
Resulted in him being banished to the night shift, yeah. The founder, Nolan Bushnell, apparently liked him, recognized his talent, but just had to find a way to keep him away from the rest of the staff.
But Jobs' takeaway from Atari was profound, wasn't it? Product simplicity.
Absolutely. Games didn't need a manual. They had to be easy enough for, and this was his phrase, a college freshman on acid to figure out. An unusual standard, maybe, but effective for intuitive design. Hashtag C3. The birth of Apple and the Macintosh, 1976-1984.
Okay, so now we transition into the core years of the startup. The Apple I was really just a circuit board.
Right, for hobbyists.
But Jobs instantly saw that customers didn't want components. They wanted an integrated product, complete package. Casing, keyboard, power supply, software. He saw that market shift before almost anyone else.
And this is where his obsession with industrial design just exploded. He was inspired, very specifically, by the elegant, lightweight plastic casing of Cuisinart food processors.
Saw them at Macy's, apparently.
Yeah, he wanted that same friendly, approachable aesthetic for a personal computer. So he hired Jerry Manick to design a clean, sympathetic plastic casing for the Apple II.
And this is the moment where his father's lesson, that perfection of the unseen, gets reapplied to technology, but with a potentially massive financial cost attached.
Oh, he was ruthless about it. He rejected an initial circuit board design for the Apple II simply because the lines weren't straight enough, demanding perfection for something no user would ever even see.
And later, during the Mac development,
He made the entire team sign their names, which were then engraved inside the machine's case, like an anonymous internal monument to the creators. The true artists, he argued, always sign their work.
this level of perfectionism, it needed capital. When they needed funding, the investor Don Valentine was apparently hesitant about Jobs' youth, his temper.
Told him he needed a partner who understood marketing and distribution. This led them to Mike Markula, who became absolutely instrumental in legitimizing Apple, securing crucial funding for the public offering, the IPO.
The company was growing incredibly fast. But internally, the sources reveal maybe a lack of consistent loyalty from Jobs.
Yeah, the Daniel Cockney story is pretty telling. A friend from college, from India, from the garage days, denied shareholder stock options given to other founders and engineers. Ostensibly because he was officially classified as just a per-hour technician, even though he'd been there from the very start. That decision caused deep personal rifts, highlights the colder, maybe unsentimental side of Jobs' genius,
And ironically, around this time, he's spearheading the Lisa project.
which he secretly named after his daughter Lisa, whom he hadn't yet fully acknowledged.
And the team was even forced to invent some ridiculous post-high acronym, local integrated systems architecture, or something just to publicly deny the real connection.
The Lisa project frustrated him, though. Too slow, too bureaucratic. That led him to basically seize control of Jeff Raskin's low-cost project, which Jobs then renamed Macintosh.
Spelled differently from the audio company Macintosh.
Intentionally so. It was basically a hostile takeover within Apple, and it gave birth to the legendary Mac team, which adopted this fiercely rebellious kind of renegade spirit.
Hanging the pirate flag,
Yeah.
that visual is just so iconic.
Oh. Isn't it? The mantra was, it's better to be a pirate than join the Navy. This was like a declaration of war against Apple's own corporate structure and against the slow pace of the whole computer industry.
They prided themselves on moving fast, disrupting things.
And being willing to steal good ideas, their term, from places like Xerox PyRark, where they first saw the potential of the graphical interface.
And this high-pressure, intensely motivational environment, it gave rise to one of his most, well, infamous traits, the reality distortion field, the RDS.
Coined by engineer Bud Tribble, borrowing from Star Trek. And it wasn't just charisma, was it? It was this complex psychological cocktail.
How did it work?
It was Jobs' powerful ability to convince himself first and then everyone around him of this revised, more optimistic version of reality, making impossible deadlines suddenly feel attainable. It was a mix of charismatic rhetoric, sheer indomitable will, and this constant deft adaptation of facts to fit whatever his immediate purpose was.
So the RDF was essential for driving these impossible feats of engineering, like shrinking the Mac into existence. But it was also deeply dangerous for the people caught in it. Made long-term planning incredibly difficult.
Totally. If an engineer said a technical challenge was impossible, Jobs would just, like, stare at them, explain why their logic was flawed, or sometimes he'd pivot the argument to something completely different, unrelated, only to bring it back hours later with renewed conviction. Exhausting, apparently, but often effective.
And the culmination of all this intensity was the Mac launch in January 1984. Jobs insisted on a revolutionary ad campaign.
The 1984 ad, directed by Ridley Scott, huge $750,000 budget, portraying IBM as Big Brother and the mesmerized masses as skinheads.
The Apple board initially hated it, right?
Yeah.
Rejected it.
Yeah, I thought it was way too aggressive. The source notes that Wozniak, though, when he saw it, was so captivated by its message, that rebellion against conformity, that he actually offered to pay half of the staggering $800,000 Super Bowl airtime cost himself.
Wow. That's commitment. It was a massive cultural insight and a huge expensive risk that really paid off.
It did. But immediately after the launch, internal conflict just flared up again. Jobs wanted the Mac priced at $1,995.
But CEO Scully insisted on $2,495.
Right. And Jobs later claimed that single decision was the primary reason Mac sales slowed down significantly, allowing Microsoft to eventually dominate the market. He felt the Mac, his creation, was being pulled away from his vision. Hashtag C4. Conflict, Exile, and Resilience, 1985-1996.
And that tension, it just boiled over in 1985. Jobs had just turned 30 that February. There are sources where he's reflecting about how easy it is for people to get complacent, stuck in patterns after 30.
Is that pathetic?
Yeah. By May, the conflict with Scully, the CEO Jobs himself had hired, reached a head. The board sided with Scully, and Jobs was publicly, humiliatingly fired from the company he started.
Just devastating for him. A complete loss of identity, purpose, marked the end of his first act at Apple. But that very public failure, it forced him into his next chapter, and that chapter would ultimately be his real education in patience and complex business strategy. NextT.
Right. He founded NextT, intending to build these powerful, high-end personal workstations, mainly for universities.
Essentially, the big Mac project that Apple's new management, led by Jean-Louis Gasset, who Jobs bitterly called truly evil, had canceled.
And NextT became the place where Jobs took his father's lesson on perfectionism to, well, an economic extreme.
Totally unfettered by commercial pragmatism, it led to ruinous costs. He insisted on eliminating these tiny things called draft angles on the cube's mold, cost an astronomical $650,000, just because he wanted a perfectly symmetrical, pure cube aesthetic.
And the internal screws again.
Ordered expensive chroming for internal screws that, again, only repair technicians would ever see. That insistence on unseen perfection, while philosophically consistent with his dad's lesson, was commercially disastrous.
The NextT Cube was late, incredibly expensive.
Launched at over $6,500, sold in tiny numbers. The hardware company was just a massive sales failure. The tech was superb, apparently, but the price point just made it prohibitive for almost everyone.
Yet even in failure, the myth around him just grew, didn't it? Ross Perot invested heavily after seeing a documentary about NextT.
Yeah, Perot famously identified with Jobs, mythologized him as this poor, brilliant visionary, barely finished high school, but destined to change the world.
You know, the key expression here really feels like every cloud has a silver lining.
Absolutely. The failure of NextT hardware ultimately steered him toward its software, Next Step, which would prove invaluable later. And it also led him to another venture.
Pixar.
Right. Jobs purchased Pixar, then just the graphics group from George Lucas.
And he helped secure that critical 3-film deal with Disney, led by Jeffrey Katzenberg at the time. Their first big project, Toy Story, was conceptually pretty profound.
It was based on this philosophical idea, maybe from his Zen studies, that objects have an innate essence or purpose. The story focused on the existential fears of toys being replaced, appealing to really deep, universal anxieties.
But the sources talk about a near-fatal crisis mid-production.
Oh yeah. Disney ordered production halted. They saw an early version where Woody, the main character, had somehow been made into this unrelenting jerk. That's Tom Hanks' quote, who voiced him, a complete jerk.
So what was Jobs' contribution there?
His resilience, really, and his support for the creative team. He backed the decision to rewrite the story, center it again on Woody's essential, appealing character. It showed he understood that the creative process often requires pausing, requires revision. You can't just push through.
And following Toy Story's massive success, Jobs engineered Pixar's IPO in 1995.
And he gambled big time. Priced the shares at $22 instead of the planned $14. Created the largest IPO of the year, even bigger than Netscape's.
Which was huge then.
Massive. And this shrewd financial move gave Pixar the leverage it desperately needed in negotiations with Disney for future films.
And while all this professional drama was unfolding, his personal life stabilized somewhat. He met Laureen Powell in 1990.
After giving a speech at Stanford Business School, they married in 1991 in a Zen ceremony officiated by his longtime spiritual advisor, Kobun Chino.
But even there, the anecdotes about his domestic life perfectly illustrate his uncompromising approach to design.
It's a sofa story.
Right. Even years into their marriage, he resisted buying furniture, only wanted objects he genuinely admired. The sources say they spent 8 years debating the purpose and philosophy of a sofa before they finally got one.
It's incredibly revealing. This entire period, the C4 section, it just exemplifies resilience. And, we can use that modal verb would here for those repeated past actions. Like, he would often spend hours perfecting every internal detail of the next T-cube. Or Perot would go on to mythologize Jobs' life story. The exile, it was his necessary, if painful, learning phase. Hashtag C5, the return and reinvention, 1997-2010.
Okay, fast forward in 1996. Apple is in crisis, seriously struggling under CEO Gil Amelio. They desperately need a new operating system.
And Jobs saw his opening. Amelio was somehow convinced to buy NXT, which by then had failed at hardware and was just focused on its software, Next Step, for $427 million.
And Jobs immediately started positioning himself for control.
Famously told Oracle CEO Larry Ellison during a walk something like, "I don't need more money, I just need to be in control of the company he built." His plan was pretty clear. NXT acquisition, get a seat on the board, and then eventually the CEO chair.
But the sources say he was actually quite hesitant to accept the interim CEO role in '97, worried about splitting time between a broken Apple, a now successful Pixar, and his family.
He was. So what pushed him over the edge? It was apparently a conversation with Andy Grove, the legendary CEO of Intel.
What happened?
Jobs was outlining his pros and cons list about returning to Apple, and Grove just interrupted him bluntly, said, "Steve, I don't give a damn about Apple."
Ouch.
Right. But that quote instantly clarified Jobs' own feelings. He realized he did give a damn. He cared deeply about where the company he founded was going. He had to return to stabilize it, even if just temporarily.
And his return marked an immediate and pretty ruthless turnaround. He applied his signature binary classification, hero or jerk, great product or crap, to the whole operation. Just started cutting ruthlessly.
Shouting things like, "The products are crap, they don't have any sex appeal."
He instantly killed non-core projects that were just diluting the brand, like the entire printer business.
Ow.
Just called the HP executive and terminated the licensing deal. Done.
He realized focus was critical. Deciding what not to do, he said, was as important as deciding what to do. That was his greatest strategic move upon returning.
And crucially, he connected with this young designer, Joni Ive,
who was apparently on the verge of resigning because the previous management, Amelio, just didn't value design. This partnership, Jobs and Ive, it redefined the company.
They bonded over this shared aesthetic, right?
Yeah.
Zen simplicity, Bauhaus ideals.
Exactly. For them, design wasn't an afterthought. It was the entire premise. The engineering had to follow the design, not the other way around. Jobs even obsessed over the materials used in the Apple retail stores later.
Replacing standard lightwood floors.
With Pietra Serena blue-gray sandstone from a specific quarry near Florence, Italy. Insisting on material integrity in every single aspect of the brand experience.
And the first big result of this partnership was the iMac in 1998. A genuine breakthrough.
It really was. Friendly, integrated, colorful, looked like nothing else on the market. It even had that little handle on top.
To make it seem pleasant to carry, approachable.
Yeah.
Solve the whole setting up a computer is scary problem.
And Jobs stabilized the balance sheet, too, by forging this critical agreement with his old rival, Bill Gates.
The Microsoft deal.
Securing Microsoft Office development for the Mac. That strategic truce ensured Apple's survival, kept it part of the essential software ecosystem.
And then there was the Think Different campaign, developed with ad guru Lee Clow.
This campaign brilliantly framed Apple not just as a hardware company, but as this lifestyle brand for creative rebels, for the misfits.
Jobs initially didn't want to narrate the final ad himself, though.
Right, but Clow convinced him. Argued that because Jobs truly believed in that message, the ethos of the crazy ones, the nonconformists, he was the only person who could deliver it authentically.
So Jobs recorded the voiceover.
creating this piece of iconic, deeply personal branding that just signaled to the world. His vision, Apple's original soul, had returned. Hashtag C6, iPod, stores, and the final message, 2001, 2011.
Okay, so the iMac stabilized the company. Jobs then moved on to what he called the digital hub strategy, the computer as the central organizer for your photos, your music.
Right. And this shift led to new clashes, particularly with Adobe.
What happened there?
Jobs asked Adobe to port their video editing software, Premiere, to the Mac. Adobe basically said no, claiming the Mac user base wasn't big enough to justify the cost.
Jobs felt betrayed.
Absolutely furious, apparently. And that incident planted the seed for Apple to create its own internal software suite, Final Cut Pro, eventually iMovie, further developing its own closed ecosystem.
Then came the iPod, born out of engineering opportunity and a massive industry need because digital music was a mess.
Total mess. Piracy was rampant. The major technical challenge, though, was size. Competitors had these large, clunky MP3 players.
So where did the breakthrough come from?
Jobs' engineer, Tony Fadell, couldn't find a suitable, small, high-capacity hard drive in the U.S. The key came when another engineer, John Rubinstein, was on a trip to Japan.
And he found it.
Secured this tiny 1.8-inch high-capacity hard drive from Toshiba, something previously unseen in the U.S. market. That was the technical key that unlocked the iPod's impossibly small size.
But the real genius wasn't just the device, it was the whole ecosystem, right? The iTunes store model.
Exactly. The music industry was being destroyed by piracy. It created friction for users, financial ruin for record labels. Apple solved this not just with hardware, but by controlling the distribution, creating this incredibly intuitive, friction-free purchasing interface.
Buy a single track legally for 99 cents.
Yeah.
Radical then.
Totally radical. And that strategic decision controlling both the hardware and the software experience made the iPod a global game changer, far beyond just its physical design.
He then went on to revolutionize retail itself. He worked with Ron Johnson from The Gap.
And Larry Ellison, actually, on the payment technology side, Jobs initially wanted to organize the stores around products, Mac section, iPod section.
But Johnson convinced him to pivot.
Yeah. They actually delayed the store openings by a month to reorganize the entire layout around customer activities. Editing video, mixing music, getting help, troubleshooting issues.
Which led directly to the concept of the Genius Bar.
Exactly. And this pivot, pausing and completely revising the store design, became this perfect retrospective lesson for Jobs. He related it back to his earlier career.
Like fixing Woody in Toy Story.
Or correcting the Mac's original floppy drive issues. His motto became something like, if something isn't right, you can't just ignore it and promise to fix it later. You have to fix it now.
That commitment to perfect execution, coupled with the success of the iPod and then later the iPhone, it just cemented his final legacy. By 2005, Apple stores were getting thousands of customers a week, generating record revenue per square foot.
Unheard of in retail.
The final story block, though, is, sadly, his battle with cancer. In 2003, he received that terrifying diagnosis, a rare form of pancreatic cancer.
He recounted the devastation of that moment, the doctors telling him to go home and get his affairs in order.
But then, immense relief. A biopsy showed it was a much less aggressive, operable form, islet cell neuroendocrine tumor.
Right. And this period, facing his own mortality, it clearly informed his final great piece of public communication, the 2005 Stanford commencement speech.
That speech is incredible. It distilled his life philosophy into those three essential narratives, connecting the dots.
Looking backwards, the calligraphy class example.
Love and loss.
Getting fired from Apple, the company he loved.
And death.
The cancer scare. He used the stark reality of limited time to urge the graduates. Don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma living with the results of other people's thinking.
The cultural reflection from that speech is just immense, and it concludes with that iconic expression.
Stay hungry, stay foolish. A phrase he borrowed from the back cover of the final issue of the Whole Earth catalog.
Which he called the Bible of his generation.
Right. That phrase became his immortal legacy, emphasizing that need for continuous curiosity, for daring innovation, right up until his death in 2011. #tag integrated language study section.
Wow. Okay, we have covered nearly 6 decades of just intensity, breakthrough, struggle. Let's take a moment now to maybe revisit some of the powerful English language elements we encountered, using the context we just explored.
Good idea. We could start with a quick pronunciation drill, that soft day sound. It's critical in names and key terms we've covered. Jobs, genius, journey, garage. It's a sound that often requires careful practice for non-native speakers to really master.
Jobs, genius, journey, garage. Yeah, you can hear it.
Yeah.
We also wanted to highlight some fascinating word nuances. Jobs himself, as we said, was obsessed with the precise meaning of words, like
Oh.
when he looked up voluble.
Right. The sources recount him looking up the dictionary definition. It meant easily turned around or characterized by unpredictable changes of mood, a common criticism aimed at his, let's say, mercurial behavior.
And he found the antonym.
Saturnine, meaning cold-tempered or slow to change. And he basically concluded that being voluble wasn't so bad because it suggested responsiveness, passion, not just stagnant rigidity. Understanding that subtle contrast really enriches how we describe his personality.
And this obsession with definition, it also informed his views on, say, create versus invent.
Yes, he believed Bill Gates never truly invented anything fundamental, that Gates only copied and created brilliant market strategies, whereas Jobs saw himself as possessing an inventive instinct for products, something born from intuition, not just market analysis. That distinction in language really defined their decades-long rivalry.
Okay, and finally, let's just quickly revisit our key grammar focus for biographical narrative.
Hmm.
Those modal verbs used to and would for describing past habits.
Right. We used to when describing a distant habit that has now ended, like Jobs used to sleep on friends' floors after dropping out of Reed. It's a completed past state or habit.
And we use would more for describing repeated actions within a specific defined period in the past, like he would often spend hours perfecting every detail, demanding the highest quality from his engineers during the next T or Mac development phases.
Mastering these two structures, used to and would, allows you, the listener, to paint a much richer, more dynamic picture when you're telling stories about someone's life or past events.
So a little practice challenge for you. Try retelling the story of his exile being fired from Apple using some of this rich vocabulary. Focus on the emotional devastation he must have felt, the subsequent financial ruin of NXT hardware, but also the profound resilience that led to the Pixar breakthrough.
Yeah, retelling a high-stakes moment like that really solidifies both the historical facts and the advanced language you're learning. Hashtag E, calls to action.
We really hope that framing Jobs' biography as this kind of narrative study has been illuminating for your advanced English practice. Using narrative texts, like biographies, is truly one of the most powerful ways to master high-level storytelling in any language.
So think about the core conflicts we discussed. Jobs' reality distortion field, his almost manic design obsession, the influence of Zen spirituality, or just his sheer resilience after being publicly fired. What part of Steve Jobs' journey do you find most essential to his eventual success?
Engaging with this material deeply helps solidify both the historical facts and the language skills you're building. We'd love to hear your insights. Hashtag F, closing segment, final reflection.
Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive, we leave you with those major themes we've distilled from the sources. The often high price of perfectionism, the absolute necessity of trusting your intuition, and the immense power of resilience after, well, very public failure.
Jobs reflected near his 30th birthday, didn't he? That the thread of his life and the thread of Apple would somehow interlace like a tapestry, even if they separated for a time. And the powerful takeaway for me is that he not only returned, but he was willing to let go of an existing, great life-running Pixar, being successful to return to a broken company. Why? Simply because he realized he cared more about his original mission.
And this raises, I think, an important final question for you, the listener, as you continue your own professional journey, your own language learning journey. What seemingly unrelated threads or passions in your own life? Maybe it's a deep commitment to an aesthetic, maybe a spiritual practice, or just a technical curiosity. What threads are waiting to be woven into your future tapestry?
Because the dots only connect looking backwards.
But you have to have the faith, the focus, the confidence to trust that they will connect eventually, even if you can't see how right now.
That's a fantastic, provocative thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the extraordinary and, complicated life of Steve Jobs.
Until the next deep dive, stay curious.
And stay foolish.